Aspergers101 is proud to welcome to San Antonio Dr. Temple Grandin.
So I can see my slides up there. That's good. Better talk into the mic. Might be a really good idea. And when I was a little kid, I had very severe autism symptoms. I had no speech, all the classical autism symptoms. And I found out a lot of people here today are teachers working with young kids. Also some parents here. Can't emphasize enough the importance of early intervention. It is super important. And I got into good early intervention when I was 2.5 years old. And one of the things they worked with me was turn taking. You got to teach these little kids how to wait and take turns when they're playing a game. Now, my first slide up there, the milder forms of autism are part of just normal brain variation. In fact, the interns I saw up there on the HEB video looks like the Googleplex. Yes, and I've been there. They're the undiagnosed ones. And Silicon Valley parents, they don't let their kids get addicted to video games. Silicon Valley parents know how addictive it is. They get them away from it. But in the milder forms, it's just normal variation. Now, obviously, you get speech delay and some of these other things. It's not. A brain can be more thinking, or a brain can be more social, emotional. It's true in animals, too. You want to look at an interesting paper? Look up solitary mammals as a model for autism. Lions are more social than panthers. Does that mean panthers are defective? No, it doesn't. So the milder forms is just normal variation. You've got more technical careers in the relatives of people with autism, and you've got more bipolar in people that are in the arts. There's sort of a continuum here. And I found a super interesting 2018 paper that basically showed that the same genes that cause autism and schizophrenia also make us have a big brain. It's that simple. It's embedded. In fact, I had a chance to go out and do some very fancy, I don't know how expensive the genetic testing was, but my whole genome was sequenced, the whole entire thing. Yep, I found out why I have these awful little teeth, missing 6 adult teeth. I've got nails that break off. My skin is awful. I've got a heart problem. I've got colitis problems. Yes, explained all of that. Didn't tell me anything about the brain, nothing at all. Because the problem is each one of those genes is just a little bit, and the brain can be more thinking. You take away some of the social circuits, then you get tech circuits or art circuits or music circuits back here. And then it goes too far, and then you get epilepsy and piles of other problems. Now, Thomas Edison would probably be labeled autistic today. He was labeled a hyperactive, addled high school dropout. Einstein had no speech until age 3. What would happen to Albert today? Also, in my work with cattle handling facilities, I worked with a lot of steel workers, really smart, dyslexic, bad student steel workers who were saved by the welding class. And what's happening to junior today? Well, the ones I worked with are retiring, and they can't replace them. One of the worst things the schools have done is taking out the skilled trades classes. Absolutely the worst. Because when I get to the end of my slides, I'm going to be talking about the different kinds of minds. And the visual thinkers like me are not going to do this IT stuff. We don't understand that. We're going to go more the skilled trades route. That's the stuff we're going to do. Construction, most fun I ever had. Oh, is it fun to draw a drawing and then see it get built? Well, I had a chance to go to NASA. Boy, when I can tell you I get asked to go to NASA, I go. And the thing that I learned when I went there in September is they write stuff, rode the rockets, but the geeks and the misfits, they built the stuff. And the thing for me is career comes first and autism second. It's an important part of who I am. I wouldn't want to be normal. There's just too much emotional psychodrama. And when I went to NASA, there was a person there with Tourette's working on some very important stuff there. Would you rather be Mr. NASA or Mr. Tourette's? And that's what I thought of when I walked underneath the Mars launch platform. But I'm a good observer. That helped me in my work with animal behavior. And I saw something in that launch pad that was not supposed to be there, that nobody else saw. I watched a raccoon waddle down the steps and go off into the bushes. And I think, well, what have you been chewing? You better check that out. Now, got emotions, but emotions are different. Instead of getting emotional about social stuff, get emotional about knowledge. And when I read about the Voyager spacecraft, it's like 40 years old now, it still transmits. They've been kicked out of NASA. They've lost all their funding. But 81-year-old Ed Stone goes to mission control every day at the strip mall that is next to the puppy training center and the McDonald's. And when I read about this on the plane, I was crying like for the whole flight. You see, it's seeking knowledge. Get to see Saturn on the way. It's seeking knowledge. We might find out why planet Earth is a Class M planet. Okay, you can look that up on the internet. You got to be a Star Trekkie to know what a Class M planet is. But there's an 81-year-old scientist going to the strip mall to find out why we're a Class M planet. Because as Voyager leaves the solar system, it might tell us that. But you see, this is seeking knowledge. And I got asked last night about some of my social life, and I said I've replaced social complexity with intellectual complexity. I really, really like problem solving. And one of the things I find when we try to solve a problem, well, especially with a kid, is to overgeneralize. People go, what do we do about autistic kids in the classroom? Well, I don't know. If he's 3 years old, I can tell you a pretty canned answer on what to do. But if the kid is, 10 years old, okay, what's his problem? Bullying, doesn't read, noise in the classroom? I have to have a lot more information. You see, normal people are top-down thinkers. They tend to overgeneralize. I like stuff that's specific. Specific examples of stuff that works, specific examples of stuff that doesn't work. All right, let's look at things that work on the job front and things that don't. A hectic, busy clothing store at Christmas rush is a terrible place for a first job. Too much multitasking. A busy, super busy register at Walmart, not a good idea. But I've talked to 3 different people where an ice cream parlor was perfect. You get the social interaction, but it's not as hectic. 3 cases where teenage boys have gone into car dealerships, just started selling cars. Couldn't drive, but they started selling cars, like 2 a week. You see, and that's something where they were appreciated for their knowledge. And I can't emphasize enough the importance of learning work skills early. Let's start that in middle school with dog walking for the neighbors. It's got to be a job outside the home. Church volunteer jobs, instant, they're legal. Now they need to do some of those entry-level jobs in high school, just to learn some job skills, something they need to be doing. They got to be there every day. Maybe they might be working at HB pushing carts. One of the problems that's happening in a lot of job things is that some of these coaches don't differentiate where pushing carts for one summer is training just in job skills and where it's an appropriate career for somebody with intellectual disabilities. It's not an appropriate career for a smart math kid. And people are overthinking the label. The other thing I think is a big problem is since they changed the label, you're going from somebody who can't dress themselves to somebody that ought to be working in IT or working in a skilled trade. Oh, I've got to go back one other thing there. See that big antenna down there, the size of this room? Takes 3 of those to pull in the signal. There's geeks that synchronize these antennas with bootlegged budget. So we can find out why we're a Class M planet, because they have to use those to get the signal. This is the kind of stuff I get choked up about. Okay, I got to sit in the original launch director's chair. This is the control room where we went to the moon. This control room right here. Total ultimate geek out. Don't get hung up on the labels. Because what I'm saying is one geek's going to play video games in the basement and on a social security check, and another geek's going to maybe to HEB or going to Google or going to some other place good. And the ones that learn the work skills and they keep the video games under control have a good outcome. Now, the thing about the video game stuff is some kids can come home, play it for an hour, and stop. That's okay. There's others where it's a drug, a total drug. And again, I think in specific examples. I talked to a man who kind of is a big brother for boys that have problems. 12-year-old kid addicted to video games. They got him off of them. His grades went from D's and F's up to A's and B's. He went on the football team, got friends. Yep, and then he went back to playing video games, flunked out of school, got surly and nasty. Not a good scene. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of grandparents today coming up to me, And they find out they're on the spectrum when the grandkids get diagnosed. But granddaddy had a job, a decent job, not a dishwasher or something like that, a really decent job, because he had a paper out at age 11. You know, academic skills and work skills are not the same. I'm really horrified by this statistic about the college graduates having such a high unemployment. I've seen that, but I didn't realize it was that high. I'd like to find out where that figure comes from. It's the figure I might like to use, because I'm seeing a lot of parents where they're pushing so much on the academics, they're not doing anything on the work skills. And where the diagnosis helps is on understanding relationships. That's where the diagnosis is helpful. On the work front, I don't think it's that helpful. Okay. Too many kids never get to do the fun stuff. Well, I can tell you, the vehicle assembly building, that's when money flowed with water. That was actually designed to build 5 Saturn V's in it. Okay, there's inside and on top of the vehicle assembly building. I mean, this was like a total geek vacation. And I got to thank Brad out there for helping me, because travel agency messed up my ticket, and I called Brad. His dad used to be a pilot, and managed to get me on the flight because the tickets had been booked wrong. And I'm going, oh, my trip to NASA ruined. Thank you, Brad, for fixing my trip to NASA. Now, the thing is sudden surprises scare. We've got to stretch these kids, but we don't throw them in the deep end of the pool. You see, having a tour beforehand, that's all really good stuff to be doing. We got to stretch. Give the kids some choices. Okay, let's say it's a 3rd grade kid, so I'm going to do a job. You might say, well, you can do karate, or you could do Boy Scouts or Cub Scouts or something like that. Give them some choices. And we've got to limit the screen time. The outcomes are bad. Now, they've run out of my book, The Loving Push, that I did with Deborah Moore. The research on the video game addiction, it's ugly. There's some kids that can play them in moderation, and there's other kids where they're drugs, and we got to remove them. And it's difficult to tell which kids they are, but I'm seeing bad outcomes. And I'm not going into the video game industry. They're not going into, $60,000 plus jobs. And we got to get them interested in real activities. I've got a new book coming out this spring called Calling All Minds. It's all about inventors and patents, and my original bird kites are in there that have wingtips like jetliners have, and you can look up patents on plane wingtips, all kinds of cool stuff like that. Just get them out there doing things and tinkering. A good teacher knows just how much to push. You push too hard, you drive them to sensory overload. You don't push enough, they don't develop. But I'm seeing a lot of moms having trouble letting go. And their kid is not learning things like shopping. And I suggested to one mom that her 16-year-old should buy some printer paper, and she started crying, saying she couldn't let go. And I'm going, over printer paper? Really? And I said, you've got to let go. Okay, teaching turn-taking. If you're doing something with an electronic game, it's got to be physically passed. The phone has to be physically passed around. Real turn-taking. How do you teach manners? Manners in the 50s were taught in a much more structured way, and I call it teachable moments. So if I stirred my drink with my finger, mother would say, use the spoon. If I stuck my finger in the ice cream like that, she'd tell me that's disgusting, use the spoon. You give the instruction, and you give the instruction just very, very clearly. You don't scream no, you give the instruction. Okay, you gotta stretch. You gotta stretch without throwing them in the deep end of the pool. You see, I like visual analogies. Like that 18-year-old girl put in the clothing store at Christmas was a mess. A store like Barnes & Noble would be wonderful all year except right at Christmas time. Boy, the wrapping center at Barnes & Noble, total madhouse. I was in there, I'm going, that is not the place to be starting out an entry-level job. You don't have sudden surprises. Little kids, always give them a chance to use their language. Give them time to respond. We got to limit the video games. One of the things I was absolutely not allowed to do, both as a little kid, as an older kid, is become a recluse in my room. Had to come to meals. We got to fight recluses in the room. They have rotten outcomes. And we've got to control the amount of social media use. We got to get out doing real things. Well, they're going to do fun things in this book like make paper in the blender. You want a nice mess. You're going to take paper and chop it up in the blender and then try to make paper. That should be kind of fun. Okay, give them choices of activities to stretch, but they need to be doing things outside the home. You know, jobs on a schedule. When I was 13, mother got me a little sewing job. She just set it up at the next door with a lady that did freelance sewing. And then when I was 15, after I got thrown out of high school for fighting, I went to a special boarding school and I learned horse barn management. My parents weren't that happy about that, but I learned how to work, cleaning 9 stalls every day, feeding the horses, putting them in and out of the stalls. And my science teacher came in on the 4th year that I was there, and he gave me interesting projects. So now education was a path to a goal of becoming a scientist. I think that's really important. Okay, sound sensitivity problems. Sounds are often better tolerated if the child initiates it. Like one mom let her kid play with the vacuum cleaner where he could shut it on and off, and he went from hating it to loving it. I was just at the Hope Center in Dallas yesterday, and they were talking about how to get the kids to tolerate Walmart. Well, they say, okay, we're going to go to the Walmart parking lot, and then we give them a little reward. And then the next day, we go to the front door and touch it, and we get a little reward. And the next day, we go like 2 feet inside of Walmart. It might take 10 to 15 trips. And by doing it very gradually, where the kid stays in control, about 65% of them can learn to tolerate the Walmart. And then there's others where the sensory problem is so bad that that doesn't work. Okay, let's say you're wearing headphones. Don't wear them all the time. If you wear headphones all the time, it will make the ear more sensitive. It will actually make it worse. What you want to try to do is you can have them there with you. So if you need them, you can put them on. And there's certain places that are so atrocious. Airplane toilets is a definite yes. You know, a few places like that, I would have been terrified. I would have been sure I would have been sucked out of the airplane. But you can have the headphones with you, but then you try not to wear them. In other words, you have control. You're giving the kid control. Now, here's some interesting research that recently came out. Sensory symptoms are core primary characteristics of the neurobiology of autism. It's a brand new paper, 2017. And I was tested for deafness when I was 2.5 years old. My auditory threshold, ability to hear faint sounds, was normal. But when the grown-ups talked fast, it went into gibberish. So my speech teacher would slow down, and she'd say cup, and then she'd go cup. She'd go back and forth between saying it regular and saying it really slowly and enunciating it. There's some kids where the hearing fades in and out like a bad phone connection. I also had trouble getting speech out. And then you got your echolalic kid where they yak out the movie script, but they don't know what it means. So there's 3 basic ways that language is messed up. They don't hear it clearly. Now, they can hear the McDonald's wrapper rustling a mile away, but they're not hearing auditory detail in speech unless you say it very, very slowly. And then you have, expressive, can't get it out, and then you got, they get it out just fine, but they don't know what it means. And so in this Life animated movie, they took bits and pieces of Disney movies, worked them into the real world. So you might want to get the movie script and start picking out some lines that you could actually use in the real world to start tying language into things that are real. Now, one of the big problems with a lot of the communication disorders is attention shifting. This is the reason why it was so often when I talked to the police officers, and I unfortunately did not get there on time. My plane had a mechanical problem, and we had to go back to the gate, swap airplanes that made the flight almost 2.5 hours late. But one of the problems with attention shifting slowness is the kid takes time to respond. So when the policeman walks up to the car, you might have to wait 15 seconds for the kid to respond. I said they're like a phone on one bar trying to load a web page. And you got to wait for that web page to load. Or on the computer, it's a little thing that goes around like this. On the phone, there's a little line that goes across. And then if you're pushing it and messing with it and tapping on it, it just makes it freeze. You gotta give them time to respond. Processing speed of the brain is slower. Now, this really shows attention shifting slowness. This is an old study that was actually used for social. And they had eye tracking software on people. and looking at the movie Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and Ami Klin pointed out that the autistic didn't look at the eyes. But the thing, I looked at this, I said, look at how many times the normal person looked back and forth here. Very, very fast attention shifting, and the person with autism is looking at the mouth here, they probably can't hear it very well. All right, frustration when I was 5. This was a situation where I was not given time to respond. We had a little assignment where I had to mark all the pictures down, like B as in beautiful for bike, and I marked the suitcase with B for bag, and the teacher didn't give me time to explain that we called suitcases bags. And that was incredibly, incredibly frustrating. And the problem was I wasn't given time to respond. Now, there's other people where they get image breakup, sort of like a TV pixelating, and the picture breaks up. See, in the back of your head, you got circuits with shape, color, motion, and texture. Those circuits have to work together to make a graphics file. You know what? Scientists don't know how they work. They just know strokes break them in extremely weird ways. Like you can lose color vision, you can have stop motion coffee pouring, which is like beyond weird. And if that's the way your vision was, you'd have a really hard time learning how to read. Now, kids that have a visual processing problem, in dyslexia, maybe some sensory processing problems with their vision, they're often terrified of escalators. That's just about diagnostic of the problem, because they can't see to get on and off them. They also don't like fluorescent lights, which fortunately are going away, thank goodness. And oftentimes the eye exam will be pretty much normal, because the problem's back here. Ask a kid who can't read if he sees the print jiggle on the paper. Now, I want to make it very clear that doesn't explain all dyslexia, but it's a subtype. And there's an easy thing you can do for it. And there's a print jiggling on the paper right there. You might try printing his homework on gray paper, tan paper, lavender paper, light blue paper, all your pale pastel papers. And I know some really important people in the cattle industry have got lavender paper in their printer right now. And they had spent thousands of dollars on their dyslexia. Again, it doesn't work for everybody. But it's something so cheap and safe, well, you might as well just try it. You know, worst thing that happens, it doesn't work. Okay, you got really bad sensory problems, extreme efforts required to block it out. And there's a few books out on the book table, like Tita Mukhopadhyay, How Can I Talk If My Lips Don't Move? And they look really low functioning, but they can type, and there's a good brain locked inside. And the thing that was interesting about Stephen Hawking, he got to the point where he couldn't move at all. All the math that Stephen Hawking did was done in his head. He could not write equations. So he used a thing called Penrose geometry, which he could do in his head. And sometimes I'm hearing a lot of parents, these smart math kids, where school gets after them because they don't show the work. You've got to realize that they think differently. That is not how they think. They don't have to show the work. Now, I would take some precautions against cheating, and once I've ruled out cheating, then go ahead and let them do it in their head. And you can tell the teacher that's what Stephen Hawking does. And you can look that up online. But there's some kids with very severe sensory where they're going to need some breaks, because it's just so much effort to block out the background noise. And the thing about sensory problems is they're so variable. Like I had hearing and touch sensitivity. I still can't stand scratchy clothes against my skin. Okay, now this is an interesting paper you can look up online called Environmental Enrichments and Effective Treatment for Autism. Now it's an adjunct to ABA and OT and speech therapy and other things. And what you do is you stimulate two senses at the same time. Like you might use an aromatherapy, like maybe cinnamon, and then touch rough carpet, or cold water glass, and listen to some classical music. And you are always varying, you're always changing the two senses that you stimulate. And when I was at the Hope Center yesterday, they had a little balance beam they had the kids walk on like a tightrope. And sometimes kids start to talk. Balancing does really good things to the brain. You know, simple piece of equipment. You can also just nail a 2x4 to the floor. That will do the same thing. And so you need 3 key words if you want to find this paper: autism, environmental, enrichment. You've got to have those 3 key words to find the paper. Now, here are books that are must-buys if you're working with kids that get to be 7 or 8 years old and there's no speech. You need to be getting these books. These are people that look really low functioning when you just look at them, but they've got a locked-in syndrome. You know, Stephen Hawking looked pretty bad on the outside, and he had a brilliant brain inside. But these are really good books. How can I, Tito's book, I think they got a copy of that out on the book table. A lot of the books have gotten sold already. I really like the sequel to The Reason I Jump, written by a Japanese boy that types independently. And one of the things he said is oftentimes his carers, that's what they call them in Japan, would do too much for him and not let him do things for himself. We need to look at some of the personality things. It's sort of like a music mixing board. You can be more social or less social, more mathematical or less mathematical, more visual thinking, and there's quite a lot of variation that is probably just in the realm of variation. You have an Asperger's with no speech delay, it's probably mostly just variation. And then you've got the more severe stuff. And when I was 3, I looked terrible. Mother described how I used to smear stuff on the wall. She said, well, fortunately, I wasn't very big, so I couldn't wreck too much wall. Okay, when you hear something, you see a word, you speak a word, or you think about a word, different parts of the brain turn on. And where there's problems in autism is in the inter-office communication between the different brain departments. And what tends to happen is the back of the brain wires up more. You see, they said in that paper, 2018 paper said in autism, it's early overgrowth. And that tends to grow in the back of the brain where the art, music, and the math stuff is. And the later growing, social gets left out. Schizophrenia, it's actually undergrowth. It's just the opposite. Okay, there's my head. And there is all the nerve tails or axons that form all the different fiber bundles in the brain. And there it is without my skull, and you can see the little tiny threads. Those are single nerve tails or single axons. They might be this long, and they make bundles that wire up the inter-office communications. Now, this is a normal circuit for speak what you see. That's the normal one, and there's mine. Lots of extra pushes on it. Now, at what point are extra pushes abnormal? There's going to be no black and white dividing line on when extra branches become an abnormality. And this probably explains my visual thinking. Now, I paid a price for that. If you count the fibers, I have less fibers for speak what you see. And a lot of speech therapy helped increase the bandwidth on the fibers that were left. It's really important to get working on these little kids when they're really young. Now, that's the circuits for speak what you hear. I am definitely not an auditory learner. Definitely not. I'm a big believer in taking the things that are the kids' strengths. We got to build on the strengths. And oftentimes things that kids are good at will show up, for me it showed up in around the 3rd grade. It might show up when they're 4 years old, probably not 2 or 3 years old. But it will become obvious. Okay, like the little kid we just heard about learned how to play chess at age 4. That's early, showing the math kind of thinking. Build on strengths. This is a picture of a 9-year-old that drew in perspective. My drawing ability started showing up in 2nd and 3rd grade, and I would just draw horse heads all the time, and I was encouraged to draw lots of different things. We got to get the kids doing lots of different things. Take their fixation on trains and broaden it. We can learn the science of how trains work. We could read about the history of the railroad. You see, you can learn about business of running a railroad. You can do all kinds of mathematics with that. You can make all kinds of associative links back to the railroad. You see, it's associative thinking. Take the thing they're good at. Academic skills are uneven. Now, I heard something really awful. I just talked to a good friend of mine in Colorado. About 10 years ago, when his kid was young, he told me that his kid had like a 98 percentile in math and a 78 percentile in reading, and since there was a bigger difference, they wanted to put him in special ed. I said, that's rubbish. Now, maybe his reading was at the 40th percentile. That's just ridiculous. I don't know where some educators get ideas like that. But skills tend to be uneven. Let's build on the strength. You got a 3rd grader that's good at math, don't bore him with baby math. And who cares about showing his work? Let's give him a high school geometry book. I said, let's just give him one. See what he does with it. And if you want to find the really cool math stuff, use the Google image function. Set Google for images. And then you type in geometry, trigonometry, fractals, Penrose geometry, solid geometry. And use all these math terms. And you will find fantastic web pages that you will not find just using regular word Google, because it picks out the really cool pictures. And then it says visit the page, and it's a fantastic web page. Well, you want to find the good math stuff, that's how you find it. And there's all kinds of free classes online, Coursera, code.org. You know, the internet's sort of like a green lawn that the dogs have doo-dooed on. And there's lots of good stuff there, but don't step in the dog poop on the way. Now, this is a picture a young man sent to me to show how he thinks in pictures. Movies in his head. That is how I think. You can't get the pictures out of the kid's head. That's how he thinks. Now, let's look at visual detail. Noticing visual detail helped me in my animal behavior research. How many people know what that is right there? Okay, it's eclipse shadows through a tree. We had about a 95% eclipse at Colorado State, and you can see little eclipse-shaped shadows through the tree branches. The tree branches act like pinhole cameras. I didn't know eclipses did this, but I noticed this. And I watched many, many other students walk over this. This is on the sidewalk in front of our library on the main campus. I also was kind of disgusted that a lot of students just weren't interested in the eclipse. We go, man, you don't have an eclipse every day. And it happened right during the class change period. Increased auditory capacity, enhanced pitch discrimination, better at detecting unexpected sounds, easily distracted. That would explain some of the sensory overload. I find I'm very sensitive, like when the plane backed out today and all of a sudden it lost power, and I go, ooh, something's wrong here. The pilot comes on and says, we have a maintenance issue. Then he said we had to swap out the airplane. He didn't tell us what was wrong with it, but that airplane was not fit to fly. But any little deviation, I'll notice it. Other people are freaking out about bumps and turbulence. I'm going, it's just a bumpy road. But I remember one time we took off from Denver, and it seemed like the plane was pulling to the side slightly. I go, something's not right. It was very, very subtle. Pilot comes on and says, we've had a hydraulic failure. We're going back to the airport. It was very subtle. It wasn't real obvious, but I noticed something wasn't right. So I'll notice that. Okay. Visual thinking really helped me in my work as an equipment designer. So how did I sell jobs? I would show portfolios of pictures, like I'd show this picture. In the late 80s, I sold Bill Fielding of Cargill Corporation. It's just set in my portfolio. And it had pictures like this in it. It had some articles I wrote for Meat Magazine, a cover letter, and a big fold-out drawing. I'll show you what that looks like. In fact, they're going to be auctioning off one of the drawings tonight. That's the kind of drawing I'd put in the portfolio. Basically a 30-second wow. You know, the mistake people make is put too much junk in it. And it's got to be neatly presented, because when you're weird, you sell your work. And that's how I sold jobs. And one of the things I recommended to HEB, write about your successes. Write about what you're doing in the supermarket magazines, business magazines, and then also in some professional journals. Because when I first started out, I became a writing machine. I'd write about the projects. And then makes you sort of an expert when you write about things, but become a writing machine. And there's the one they built for the movie. I love the fact that the movie duplicated all my jobs using the original drawings. Because for me, career is what gives my life meaning. It's just like Ed Stone on the Voyager. Every day, 81-year-old Ed Stone goes to the strip mall to communicate with Voyager. You see, that gives his life meaning. All right, starting my career in construction. Now, there were people that treated me badly, but there also were people that were really good that mentored me. And one of them was the plant engineer at the Swift plant. I had kind of made my own internship there before internships were invented, and we were working on this project here, Swift 1974, and I criticized some welding, and I said it looked like a pigeon doo-dooed on it. And Harley pulled me into his office, and there was a little office down in the boiler room, and he coached me in just the perfect way, really calmly. He says, sit down. We've got to nip these cancers before they metastasize. Calling it pigeon doo-doo is really rude, and you have to apologize to Whitey, the welder. And then he explained Whitey was a maintenance welder rather than a contract welder, and his welds weren't pretty, but they held. And then he also explained that Whitey was his employee, and if I didn't like the welding, I should have come to him. So he explained to me some stuff on chain of command, and then he made me go up to the cafeteria and apologize to Whitey. And I didn't tell him the welding was wonderful, but I apologized for the rude talk. But that's the kind of coaching that a person needs, very specific. You know, it would have been not good at all if Harley had just said, well, you're rude with other people. You see, that's too vague. He told me what to do in terms of the rude talk. He also explained to me that I should have come to him if I didn't like the welding. You know, he was telling me, you know, what to do. Another thing I learned from construction, it has an urgency. And I found that it affects my attitude how I go about things. You got to get it done. And I talk to a lot of parents, and they'll say, when I ask about their kid getting a job, they say, we're thinking about it. I said, we don't think about it in construction. We do. You don't have parts? We'd get on the phone and call and call and call. And I will never forget the day when Jim the contractor blocked Hopple Street in Cincinnati with a cement truck. I said, how do you get away with that? How did you get permission for that? He says, I just did it. And you do it when it's not busy. When the police come around, you ask them to direct the traffic for you. It's an attitude. You've got to get it done. You don't think about it. There's like an urgency there. And there was a guy named Jim, a really good guy who helped me out. The people that were bad to me in the workplace were foremans that were just below the plant manager or the feed yard manager. But there were some good people in the cattle industry. And there were also some people that were bad to me. But what I learned from construction is this kind of urgency. And I don't see this in educating. There's too much meetings, too much talk. There's a point we got to do. Let's figure out how to get this kid a job, a decent job. We've got to just do it. And also in some situations, it's better just to say, well, he's a bit shy, you know, help get him out of his shell. I learned things like how to work on a team job. I would say, okay, now which part of this you want me to do? Okay, I will design from this rail switch back. Okay, I need the rules on the railroad right away, that I've got to keep my stuff out of that. Do you own the field outside the chain link fence? Can I go into the field? In other words, I want to know, you know, I used to classify jobs. I used to call them Band-Aids, minor surgery, major surgery, and new construction. I had 3 classifications. So I go into one place that might be a real dump, and I might just show them how to fix a couple of gates. That's a Band-Aid. You know, I kind of had to size the client up to see what kind of a job it was. And then open fields, new construction, those are the easiest. But I'm finding people leave detail out. I was just looking at a drawing just the other day for a major company, well, not name, and they left all the block gates out. Well, if you have a 300-foot-long cattle alley without block gates, and you get them all the way down there and then they run back by you, that's not too cool. You might want to have some block gates in there. And that's the first dip vat they're being built. But I love the construction. And I realize how much it affects how I think. That you got to get it done. You know, we can't just keep thinking about it. You order the steel, and then when it comes, you have to build. But you do have to order the steel. Okay, there's one of my drawings. And I would, I hope it's showing up good on the screen. Yes, it is. And I would send people big fold-out drawings. You know, now I would have them on a web page. Okay, there's the original dip vat. This is how I sold jobs. I go in for the interview because I'm working on the design stuff. I'm working on design stuff, the more skilled trade, you know, architectural drafting, industrial design. There's the design side of engineering. Visual thinkers like me do the design, industrial design. Like Steve Jobs was an artist. He wasn't an engineer. He designed a phone that was easy to use. Everybody else copied it. Everybody copied it. But the engineers had to make the phone work on the inside. See, that's the different kinds of minds. And this is a big meat packing plant. Don't worry, I'm not going to show you any gucky slaughter pictures. And this is center track restrainer system, a piece of equipment I developed. It's in every major big meat plant. You got 3 of them in Texas. Yeah, we had roast beef today, and really good, and it probably went through one of my systems if it was fed beef. But I want to show you that because there's a lot of metal work there. And there's a tendency for a lot of people to stick their nose up at skilled trades. I worked with a lot of smart, quirky guys that own metal fabrication companies that would probably be labeled dyslexic or on the spectrum today. And they had paper routes when they were 11, and they took welding in school, and it completely saved them. Now, this isn't for everybody. You see, the computer programming and IT, that's one route. That's for your mathematicians. But for us visual thinkers, this is the sort of stuff that's more the route. And we need skilled trades. We have a huge shortage right now, mechanics and welders and plumbers. I was in Pittsburgh about 2 weeks ago. Brad and Teresa and I were at a meeting. We almost had to do a 900-person conference with porta potties. We came that close to it because a water main had broken in Pittsburgh. They're not taking care of their water system. They had no water in the Sheraton in Pittsburgh for 24 hours. They finally got it fixed. Brown crud came out of the faucets. And the toilets did work the next day for our meeting. But they're going to be in serious trouble with their water system. And then I complained about it in the talk, and I had people come up to me that worked with the water system, and they said, yeah, they're going to be in trouble. And that's just another picture of the metal work there. You know, a lot of complicated stuff. Okay, I realized my thinking was different when I asked people about church steeples, and I was shocked to find out that people that are verbal in their thinking just see sort of a generic pointy thing. For me, there's no pointy thing. They flash up into my mind like Google for images. They're specific. Concepts are formed with specific examples. That is bottom-up thinking, not top-down. It's also exactly how artificial intelligence works. It's the ultimate autistic brain in silicon. And things like skilled trades are not going to go away. I do a lot of talks in real full theaters that have a fly loft and all the ropes and everything. Theater's not going to go away. People are still going to want to see live theater. That's something that's a career that isn't going to go away. What's going to go away is I wouldn't bother studying radiology, internal medicine, oncology, forget it. You're going to get replaced. That's the stuff that's going to get replaced. Translation will get replaced, data entry will get replaced, plumbing, welding, a lot of building stuff. There's a lot of IT stuff that's not going to get replaced. Okay, so I see specific examples. My concept of what a steeple is made out of specific examples. And then the more specific examples I have, I can then put them in categories. Chapel type, cathedral type, warehouse type, a shopping mall remodel type. My concept gets better, and I can sort them into finer and finer categories the more examples I have. It's bottom-up thinking. And I'm really good at problem solving. I've already diagnosed the Southwest airplane engine rip-up. I think the cowling is defective. A single fan blade coming off should not have busted through the housing, and the whole housing fell off. And I'm not sure if it is made of a composite, but if it was made of a composite, then that failed. You see, now I'm starting to go, there have been other times where a fan blade came through and it punctured the cabin. Yeah, they better get that fixed. They may have to add weight to the airplane. Okay, and in my TED Talk, I talked about airplane accidents where this was almost 8 years ago when I gave that talk, where it was not pilot error and it's not weather. I said this one word, tails. It either fell off, a major piece fell off, or the steering mechanism inside the tail broke. That explained about 6 really horrid total airplane crashes. Tail. Well, I think they're going to have to do something about the engine housing. Yeah, they're concentrating on the fan blades, but even if all the fan blades broke, it should stay contained. Okay, we'll just see what the final report comes out. But it looked like it was made out of a composite. I was studying the pictures intently on the plane today. Okay. Very intently. Okay. Well, I always thought I had a big visual thinking circuit. Turns out my brain's got a great big visual thinking circuit in it. And this scan's 10 years old. The technology for doing these scans is available in the hospitals, except nobody knows how to use it. We're still just using a behavioral profile, which is half science and half doctors squabbling in conference rooms. Okay, here's the wrecked algebra department. I'm seeing a lot of visual thinking kids like me being held back by the algebra requirement. Let them do geometry. Fortunately, in Colorado now, they're letting them do statistics or geometry. What saved me in college was algebra wasn't required. And when I went to college, it was finite math, probability, and statistics. Why are we getting so hung up on algebra? You've got a gatekeeper here that's screening out mostly your visual thinkers. And I've got no working memory. Tasks that involve a sequence, you need to give them a pilot's checklist. Okay, if we're going to clean the ice cream machine at McDonald's, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3, 1 to 3 words, just to key words to jog the memory. Just like a pilot's checklist. You can actually look up pilot's checklist. It doesn't have a book. It's like just a few words that jog the memory, because I don't remember sequence well. I've got no working memory. And so don't burden them with long strings of verbal information. I have to write stuff down. Okay, there's the pilot's checklist. Do not load working memory. Okay, I'm going to end on this slide because I want to just leave it up there so everybody can see it. This is one of my most important slides. And I talk about this in my book, The Autistic Brain. And there's science to show that there are different kinds of thinking. There's photorealistic thinking, visual thinkers like me, who think in photorealistic pictures. Can't do algebra. You need to jump these kids to geometry instantly. Then you have the pattern thinker. These are going to be IT guys. These are the kids that are doing math really well in 3rd grade. They think patterns, think origami, think organic chemistry molecules, think, you look up Penrose tiling. They elaborate tiling patterns. This is thinking in patterns. These kids often might have a hard time with reading. Then you got the verbal facts guy who knows everything about history. But if he knows everything about cars, he could be doing really well in a car dealership. Now, a car dealership's quiet, and these boys were appreciated for their knowledge of the cars. They didn't let them drive them. They couldn't drive. And on driving, I drove 200 miles on dirt roads. So what I'd recommend on driving is burn up a tank of gas on back roads, fields, big parking lots, really safe places, 20 to 15 minutes every day until you burn up a tank of gas. Because we went 3 miles up to my aunt's mailbox and 3 miles back. And I'd recommend doing that before we go near any traffic. Driver's ed often chucks them into it way too fast. And that's just a disaster. And it was just lucky that my aunt's ranch, we had to pick up the mail anyway. And so she just had me do it. And then you have some people that are auditory thinkers. These are the people that are really, really, really good talkers. They're auditory thinkers. And when you get some kind of a label, the skills tend to be much more uneven. And we got to be looking at strengths. I'm seeing too much sort of handicap mentality. I love things like the Paralympics, super souped up wheelchairs, making them really cool. The stuff they're doing with prosthetic legs. I heard an interview the other day on NPR. Well, and this lady says, I got my real fancy electronic ones, and then I got my junkyard ones, and I just build them with bolts and stuff I buy at Home Depot for snowboarding. That's the sort of kind of can-do. When I got inducted into the Women's Hall of Fame, there was a lady there named Amy, and she's the one who got the Cheeto leg, or that Blade Runner leg, invented. She didn't invent it, but she caused it to be invented. She went and seeked out engineers and said, I want something I can run on. And then she went to the wax museum people to make a really pretty dress leg that would look really nice. You see, that's going out and making stuff work, and doing stuff that you can do. That's what we got to do. And there's some things I tried to, do a lot of stuff with sports when I was young, and I'm not that coordinated. I could play sports socially, but I never could get that good. I could never learn to keep my skis together and do those perfect Christies. Wanted to do it, but I couldn't do it. So I got to go do something I can do. I can assure you of that. And you know what? I think I'll end it on that. Thank you.